Hi, Jerry Kennedy, personal lines agent for many years and actually personal lines national faculty for the last 30 years or so. I was asked to talk about a couple important issues when it comes to how we value our clients' property losses in the homeowner's context. For many of our clients, their single largest asset is their home. Their single largest concentration of value is the home and all the things that are in it. And so, as an agent, I've always felt that job one for me is to make sure that they have enough to replace it and replace everything in it. Unfortunately, historically, the the percentage of our clients that are underinsured, that don't have enough to replace their home rents, anywhere from 60 to 80%. And I'm sure that during the pandemic, when lumber went up 100% or more, probably 100% of our clients were underinsured, and many of them are probably closer to that point still. Um, but there's a lot of reasons other than pandemic-induced supply chain shortages that can create a problem with insurance to value. One is it always costs more to rebuild a home than it costs to build it in the first place. You don't have the same economies of scale that a builder would have had by building multiple homes or developing a tract development. Another is we're seeing a lot of times where there's catastrophic losses, where you've got a natural disaster like a flood or earthquake or a tornado, or particularly where we're talking here, where I live, wildfires and other things. When there's such widespread damage, the availability of repair companies and contractors is something, and the cost to get them, if you can, will go up 20 or 30% or more, and not just for months, sometimes even for years. We'll see an increase in the cost to replace and rebuild. And another issue that people don't think about is the cost to clean up the mess. In my experience, the cost to remove the debris of a home that's been a total loss will cost anywhere from 15 to 20% of what they have on their home. And how much did we give them in their homeowner's policy as an additional coverage for debris removal? Yeah, about 5%. So we'll come up short there too. And there's any number of other reasons. So, and I know it's true because in the last 10 years or so, in the three losses that we had in our agency, where we had total losses to people's homes, every single one of them, all three of them, needed more to rebuild than they had on their coverage A limit. Now, the good news was that I fortunately added an increased replacement cost endorsement. And you saw in the material that ISO offers two of them, the additional limits of liability for coverages A, B, C, and D, where coverage A increases to whatever is actually needed to rebuild the home, right? And then the other one that's more common, the specified additional amount of coverage A, where they're going to get another 25, 50%, or perhaps more of A to rebuild if it's needed to replace the home. So those endorsements, I'll add those to every single homeowner's policy I can, and I can add it to almost all of them in my market. But there is a problem. All of those endorsements will say that if the insured increases the cost to replace their home, if they make it more expensive to rebuild, if they add on a deck, if they add a detached garage, or in my case, after I built a new home 2 years later, I finished off part of the unfinished basement, they have to notify the insurance company of that increase in cost to replace. If they don't, all that additional coverage goes away. I think it took me nearly a year to remember to update my replacement cost estimator. Why it took so long to tell myself I needed to update my policy when I should know better, I don't know. But it happens, right? So it's a good thing to talk to our clients about and ask them about if we're doing coverage reviews. The other issue I was asked to talk about was actual cash value. What is it and why is it important? So often we're just worried about replacement costs. We've got replacement costs on the home to replace it. We've added replacement costs for personal property by endorsement. And so why should I worry about what actual cash value is when most of the time I'm going to collect replacement? Well, there are times when the insured can only collect ACV, like when they don't replace their home, or for all those articles of personal property that they don't replace. And also, there are things that replacement cost doesn't apply to. The replacement cost contents endorsement doesn't apply to things that are antiques or collectibles. So What is ACV for those times that we're not going to get replacement cost or shouldn't get replacement cost, perhaps? Well, there's a couple approaches. One you saw in the material is ACV, actual cash value, is replacement cost less depreciation. But another, even more common approach is actual cash value should be market value, what someone would pay you, what you could sell your property for, right? A quick example of how that could work. Um, I saw yesterday a Corningware casserole dish. It was vintage. It was 1960s Corningware, and it was advertised as a real bargain at only $6,000 for a casserole dish. I was shocked. So I priced, what could I get a new one for? And it was $60. Okay, so what's the appropriate approach to value here? Do we owe people the market value of a collectible casserole of 6,000, or do we owe them replacement cost of 60 less 60 years of depreciation? Which of those is most fair? Well, how that gets resolved legally and in the courts often is many states, in fact, the majority of states, use something called the broad evidence rule. They say that insurance companies need to look at all the appropriate approaches to value. They need to look at replacement cost as depreciation as well as market value and use the approach that's most equitable, that's most fair to the policyholder. And I know for me, what's more fair for that vintage Corningware is $6,000. So hopefully that's how it would shake out in my claim. So that's that for those two topics. Thanks for listening.